people, British citizens, screaming that Hamas aren't terrorists, that Hezbollah aren't terrorists. This is happening in broad daylight on British streets. I find it incredible. Let's discuss this now with the Chief Executive at the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism, Gideon Falter. Gideon, welcome to the show. It's with a heavy heart that we have to even have this conversation. 1 year on should be a time for reflection, for memorying, for the memorial to those who lost their lives in such a brutal way and those who still are at large. And yet, this poll the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism has put out today is simply astonishing. First of all, can you tell us your thoughts about that huge event 1 year ago, and then tell us about your poll?
I think, for a start, just the poll and the event itself are inextricably linked, because the event, obviously, October 7th, the worst atrocity since the Holocaust, and we saw evidence which was filmed by Hamas and put out by Hamas that incontrovertibly told us that they went out and they murdered civilians, they raped, they took people hostage, they brutalized them, they burned people alive. That is something that there is evidence of. It's something that we saw on social media. It's something that we saw on the news. It's something that we've seen over and over again since, as forensic reports came in and as more and more casualties and victims were found. And it's something we've heard about from hostages who've been returned from Hamas captivity. But the fact that we then look at what's going on in our own country, and this is where the poll is so staggering, we look at what's going on in our own country, and I just see the problem on our doorstep. First of all, we've had these protests on our streets pretty much every week, where we've had people expressing support for terrorist organizations. We've seen police attacked. We've seen the police failing really to do very much at all about what's been going on our streets. We've seen two successive governments now failing to get to grips with this. And then we've also seen it spreading from our streets onto our campuses. But the polling results for me are devastating, because for 1 in 9, for 9%, nearly 1 in 10 of our young people, 18 to 24 years old, to sympathize with Hamas is devastating. But it's not even as bad, I think, as one of the other statistics, which is that 16% of our young people think that those Hamas attacks, which they've all watched play out on social media — this is a young generation that's been getting its news from social media — they've seen it all play out. 16% of these young people think those attacks were justified. And the general population figures aren't even that much better. 7% of people in our country think that the October 7th atrocity was in some way justified. And if you consider the way that the numbers play out, that means there are about 4.5 million people in our country who think October 7th was justified. It's an extremely dangerous state of affairs.
I find it simply incredible, Gideon. I'm particularly alarmed. I work around Westminster. I've been through a great many of these protests of both sides. I get involved in all of them. At one of them, I was begging a police officer to take down that projector that was projecting onto Big Ben from the river to the sea. They were not interested. They had no interest whatsoever in an intervention. The people in full ski masks. I was begging the coppers to arrest them. They had no interest in that, Gideon. And then I was egged for my point in that, and I was egged by a very bitter, angry-faced young woman. It struck me at the time on these protests, and your data backs it up, Gideon. Why is it that young people in particular seem so poisoned against Jews? What's going on?
I think there's an immediate problem, which is the way that news is spreading, the way that conspiracy theory is taken as fact now. I mean, just look at the fact that, from our polling, 13% of young people think the government is wrong to ban Hamas as a terrorist organization at all. And you look at where they're getting those views from, and it's from social media largely, it's from conspiracy theory. But it goes to a much deeper problem, and it's a problem that doesn't just affect Jews. Because like you say, if somebody's beaming genocidal anti-Semitic slogans onto Big Ben, if they're masked up and abusing members of the public, journalists, members of police forces, then there is something seriously wrong here. And I think the rot that there is that in many ways, not just in our country, but across the West, people are forgetting what the West is for. They're forgetting that there isn't this, that there isn't, it cannot be said to be the case that all views are equal, that there are two sides to every story. Sometimes it is the case that Hamas or others are terrorists, that they represent something that this country and everybody in it should be against. And sometimes it is the case that those opposing those terrorists are just civilians or are soldiers trying to do their jobs. And unfortunately, what we're seeing now is people who say that Hamas's attacks were in some ways justified, that if you take that along the way, it means that rape is justified, it means that murder is justified, it means that taking hostages, innocent civilians, as you say, Holocaust survivors through to infant babies, taking them as hostages is justified. And you kind of fall into a moral morass, which is, I think, unfortunately, where a lot of our young people have been dragged by some of the views that they've taken on.
Okay, thank you for joining us on this momentous occasion. Gideon Falter, of course, the Chief Executive at the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism. Hope you have some peace today. Thank you.
Thank you.